I want to talk about suicide tonight, the suicide that is very real, the suicide that, unlike some of the fake children deployed in some of these sting operations in defense of supposedly real children, are never harmed because they don't exist. But in this case, we have real harm to real people as a result of what vigilantes and the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force are up to. We don't seem to have any hard facts about the number of suicides that actually occur as a result of vigilantes or stings. It's not like bullying, where there's been a substantial amount of work over the last 20 years to understand the causes of it, understand what brings about bullying and what brings about suicide as a result of childhood bullying. But I don't think there's as much evidence for the bullying as a result of, suicide as a result of sex stings or vigilante efforts, either with or without police, to capture so-called pedophiles. I say that, I don't really know. I have researched it a little bit, so I am hedging that, and I am being honest about the fact that I'm hedging that. And if you know any statistics, please let me know. I'm sure there are some preliminary stats, but the purpose here isn't to hit the stats here tonight. The purpose is to go about and explain the dangers involved in vigilantism, and in the I.C.A.C sex stings. And really, the question is whether you believe that they are doing God's work or not, supposedly capturing pedophiles. What is very, very plain is that the sex stings very often have fantasy role play involved on those sites where they operate. And that's why police operate in that very nebulous zone where people put their vulnerabilities on the line, and they check their um, good common sense and other things at the door. And they just let loose as adults who have certain fetish interests, and they want to play. I mean, there is a lot of research about people who are adults needing to play, and that you never ever lose that need to play. And of course, now we're talking about adult play. And it's in that environment that police like to also play in a very exploitative way. And the question is whether that helps anything at all. You also have vigilantes who go about, and they want to play as well as pretend cops, as the good guys, as people who are supposedly helping children. And even though I don't really want to impinge on anyone's motivations, mine certainly has been impinged with less evidence of my supposed predation. And while always ignoring the fact that, for 30 years, not only myself, but many other people who've been caught in these things, we're branded names and everything, called pedophile, horrible person, monsters, okay? And yet we don't have any records, okay? There's no records saying that we have this long history of doing these things, right? But there is mounting evidence that I.C.A.C, also over 30 years, and Ghost CC Unit, who's been at least doing his shtick for 10 years, there is evidence that they are not above board. There is evidence that they are not telling the whole truth. And there is evidence that they're doing real damage, real harm to real people. When people commit suicide, I don't care if it's one or two, it's important. I mean, the old adage is, if we save one child from being molested, or having their psyche torn from them, that's worth it. Well, isn't it also worth keeping people alive? Isn't it also worth not judging what they supposedly did? Well, I'm going to show you a couple of articles here where it might call into question what is actually happening. And the articles I've actually had for some time, but I've had other things where I've, hit around the periphery of these articles and haven't really addressed directly, but I want to address them directly tonight. And so if I share my screen here, hopefully I get the first one up here. This is the one that should be visible now. This is from Task and Purpose magazine. It deals with military culture, military life. And according to my note here, I reached out to the author, Jeff Shogel, who is a Pentagon reporter, or at least used to be. And this, I did that on October 5th of a couple of years ago. I have a note here, October 5th, 10:07 a.m., but no year. And I'm pretty sure it was a couple of years ago when I learned about this. And I asked him if he wanted to do a follow-up, and he declined. And that was too bad because I had many questions for him. But this online vigilante group here may have contributed to the sailor's death. Certainly seems like it contributed to the sailor's death. And basically it involves Ghost CC unit. Okay. And some things that we now know a few years later that Ghost is not telling the truth about. Okay. So basically, what he did was he was inspired by Chris Hansen, and he targeted a number of people in the military who supposedly targeted girls. He says, I always grew up with girls that have been victims of sexual abuse and abuse in general. Now, according to what he tells in one of his early videos, he grew up with one person, one friend who was hit on a number of times. Apparently, she was very attractive, and she was hit on by people who were older than her. He doesn't say whether they knew her age at the time. He does suggest in the video I saw a while back that they didn't necessarily know her age. She was out and about. So, that was his reason. That was his whole rationale. Now, of course, he goes on Joe Rogan's show and he goes on other shows and he brags about how much fun it is to humiliate people and embarrass them. And let's not forget, everybody has their agenda. I have an agenda with this channel. Ghost CC Unit has an agenda, and I.C.A.C has an agenda. The Ghost CC Unit agenda is one public and one private. The public one is supposedly expose people to who want to have um, relations with children, he says. So, uh, but it is also to humiliate, to make him look good, and to make money. Okay. He talks about having two of those goals here, but not of the other one. So basically, he met somebody who was 21-year-old sailor who thought he was going to meet a 13-year-old girl. He meets this person in the parking lot, Camp Pendleton. So that has to be in the San Diego area where Ghost CC unit resides. And he walked up to the person, and the person drove away. And never was there any child in danger or anything like that. And instead of going about this um, in a more responsible way, he immediately goes to the police. He immediately goes to the NCIS investigation unit, and this man commits suicide. Now, I'm not just blaming Ghost CC unit. The NCIS has to do the investigation, but you have to wonder if there's no real contact with a child, wouldn't a diversion program for a first-time offense be a better way of doing this? Wouldn't that have been a better way to have addressed this and not a dishonorable discharge? I mean, he was supposed to be court-martialed, this Navy sailor, this seaman, on charges of attempting to commit a sexual act upon a child, solicitation to produce and distribute child pornography. Because supposedly, when you met the person, you were going to take pictures. And if you take pictures and you send those pictures to somebody, that's distribution. If you send them to Ghost or whomever. Okay. And I just have a question. Wouldn't it be better for a first time offense, seeing that these vigilante groups are exploding, that I.C.A.C has had tons of money to do its business? Wouldn't it be a better idea to, since apparently it's not curbing child predation at all, to give these guys who have no priors at all, who have no contact with a minor, give them an opportunity instead for a diversion program like they used to do, like they did, you know, 10, 15 years ago for drugs? Wouldn't that be better? I know early on they hammered them, and I have 25, 30 years ago. And now, of course, they're treating these same cases where they went to prison for life in some cases as in a very different way. And you notice that society is not collapsing around itself. So, since the stings and the vigilante groups, which have exploded, aren't really doing the job and more money is going into it, maybe something else is going on here. Maybe this is something that needs to be looked at. Because when we look at the research, we find out that people who have an interest in role play, even pedophiles who recognize their issue and go to written erotica or something like that, are not hurting anyone. Okay, you and I may not like that, but they're not hurting anyone. So maybe we need a diversion program instead of labeling these people as if they were Jeffrey Dahmer types. Okay, maybe that's what we really need because apparently this is big business. The child exploitation capture business is really big business. It's making heroes out of people. It's making them look good. It's giving them something to beat their chest about, to feel significant about. It's pouring lots of money into it. And in fact, I.C.A.C now has metrics that require them to make so many arrests, and those arrests have to amount to so many convictions for the money to keep flowing. I know trolls keep telling me that's not true, but if you look at the Houston I.C.A.C agreement, for example, which I was looking at today as part of a letter I'd written, it says right in there that they have to do that. Okay, so please don't tell me I'm wrong. Do a little research. Okay. And there's another one I'd like to share. Let's see if I have it up here. I may have to go through this other one to get to the Ghost CCU unit one. Here's one. Conroe teacher's family sues Montgomery County. This is in Texas after suicide upon a false arrest. So this happens 2 years after the one I just showed you about the Navy seaman who committed suicide when Ghost CC unit confronted him. And by the way, Ghost did not feel they had any responsibility for that death whatsoever. None whatsoever. Okay. So you have somebody who maybe is a person who has a problem, and maybe what we need to do is get the person some psychological help instead. But of course, that would amount to him not playing his proper role of being caught fair and square, and therefore that would be just terrible. I mean, we really have to start viewing these things very differently, folks. So here's a Conroe teachers who is like me in a lot of ways, and like a lot of teachers and others caught. And here the family is suing, or at least was suing, the the state for false arrest. Here's a young man who committed suicide. He was a pillar in his community. He died by carbon monoxide poisoning, deliberately done, and his family suing, saying they violated his constitutional rights. Well, what were those rights? The Fifth and the Fourth and the 14th Amendment, the right to role play. Okay. They're describing a false arrest as a sting, claiming he was a predator. Okay. Now, how did they go about doing this? Okay. How did they manage to actually uh, achieve this extraordinary idea here? Well, one of the ways that they did it to get them, one of the ways the police, sorry, I was distracted there, but one of the ways the police did it is by claiming that he was far worse than he actually was. So here's his profile. He was 39 years of age, and he was a Conroe resident, and he was a father and a brother, and he was on the Grinder app, the adult dating app. And he was immediately told that this person was 14. And he says, I don't believe you. And they joked back and forth. He says, I want to hear your voice. So in the suicide letter, he explains a lot. He says, I'm deeply angry at law enforcement as they destroyed me and gave me no other solutions. Okay. Like, how about a diversion? I wish I had more time with you, he tells his family, but Montgomery law enforcement had other ideas. Okay. So they're seeking unliquidated damages, punitive damages, etc. And here's the thing: they charge that the police made him a victim, Peterson, a victim of false arrest, malicious prosecution, and an illegal search. Okay. So this is what happened. Let me get into it a little bit here. He was on Grindr. Okay. And it forbids, it's funny because the Grinder doesn't care about this and neither does anyone else. It makes me wonder if they got anywhere with this suit. But the suit protests that Grinder only allows adults and forbids the impersonation of someone by its users. That's true. But Grinder doesn't defend its own subscribers. Okay. And it does defend police, it seems, by its silence. Okay. So Detective Derek Dunn, then 39, left Peterson a 13-second voicemail upon the teacher's request. Hey, it's Jason, what's up? Just leaving you a message. But Peterson writes in his suicide note that the audio message sounded like a black man in his late 30s, which he was, and not a 14-year-old white male as the detective reportedly claimed to be. Okay? The suit asserts that Detective Dunn purposefully did not reference the voicemail message in his attack and in the evidence because he knew it would prove Peterson was innocent. Peterson writes he was communicating with an adult pretending to be a minor. Okay, and that's how they structured their play and how he thought this was part of a role-playing game, an activity he explains he previously participated in. This is not uncommon among gay men. There's a case in Richmond, same sort of thing. The decoy, he said, gave a contradictory and gibberish answer and explaining he was a Conroe High School student living outside the school zone. Peterson writes the photos he received were a dead giveaway as they looked as they were from 2012, some years before, okay, which would indicate that he was much older than what he claimed, okay? While I feel confident of this, of winning this in a courtroom, it is irrelevant. This is a type of accusation that destroys a career and a life, no matter the eventual outcome, for the stigmata reason we've talked about on this channel and on other sites around the internet. Peterson made it to the restaurant parking lot. He left the premises by car when he saw no one was at the site. So he did go to meet this person, thinking that they weren't 14. His son, this is Douglas's father saying this, his son was pulled over by officers at a stoplight after Detective Dunn called for backup. Okay. Brian Peterson, the man who committed suicide, never saw a minor or a youngster in any parking lot. Okay. Peterson was taken into custody August 1, 2019. Okay. And he was charged with second degree, actually first degree, yes, first or second, I'm not quite sure here what he was, but he was charged with soliciting somebody 14 years, and he could get between 10 and 20 years for this third degree felony, which seems pretty steep for something that he thought was one thing and that there was no contact offense. Peterson's suicide letter said that the only time age was brought up was when he claimed to be 14 at the start of the conversation. And when he went after that conversation and said, I don't believe you, it was never brought up again. Charging a person with a false higher crime is a tactic used by police to pressure a guilty plea where there's weak evidence. The single paragraph arrest affidavit, available in court records, does not list the age that Peterson allegedly thought he was communicating with. All right. The affidavit was filed. Get this, the affidavit for his arrest was filed 2 days after his death. How do you get an affidavit for an arrest warrant 2 days afterwards, after you conducted the arrest? Meanwhile, the phone was seized and searched without a warrant, the suit asserts. We have seen this be the case many times. Okay. Peterson was released on bond, and that's when he committed suicide 3 days later. Eerily similar to mine, except that I did not commit suicide. Peterson, the suit maintains, was not seen by anybody. Nobody asked about any suicide ideations or anything like that. Okay. They certainly asked me in jail about that. All right. After he died, the Conroe Police Department searched his computers at home and at work and his iPhone and found no evidence he committed any crime. We're not against catching predators, the attorney for the family said, but we're trying to get Conroe Police Department to do things correctly. A lawyer specializing in police misconduct, Kalinin bemoaned actions taken. He said, including the reported destruction of the original suicide letter and the apparent deletion of Dunn's voice message, the detective. So why would they do that, folks, if the police were innocent, if they had no culpability? Well, they knew that they were in trouble. And maybe they had a little bit of shame that Ghost CC unit does not have. This speaks volumes because, of course, if you're a cop and you want to convict somebody of solicitation, you would have kept that if it was helpful to you. In other words, why destroy your own evidence? The city of Conroe did not respond at all. The county attorney did not respond. They except to file a motion to dismiss, and they expect to do it on this latest litigation as well. And you know, my goal here is not to even look into it further. The man's dead. Whether he wins or loses, in a way, it doesn't matter. But it does call attention once again to the tactics used by vigilante groups like Ghost CC Unit and the police, where there's no culpability, where they're so busy focused on being the hero in the case that they don't even think about the true victims, these suicides. These are the true victims in the case. And again, nobody's saying that they are against protecting real children. But can't we find a better way? We poured millions and millions and millions, almost $1 billion into these things. The vigilantes are exploding around. There's real evidence that they are on a tear, and some are working with law enforcement and some are not. Some are working in an official capacity, meaning that they have some sanction, and some are working under the table. And it's extraordinary how these groups are doing their work. Again, we look into them too, and we find out that they have been doing some pretty nasty work, and that their backgrounds, unlike this Conroe County teacher and the sailor and others, they have no background, but the vigilantes do, right? From their own sex crimes to extortion to threatening to assault to online threats, okay, to alcoholism and various other abuses of substances. I mean, it's amazing how these folks are the heroes because they're doing something that society thinks is of value. But if it was of value, we wouldn't keep having issues with child predation, as the police keep telling us, where it's out of control. Or maybe it isn't out of control. Maybe it's being hyped in some areas and ignored in others. Well, something to think about. This is Norman Michael Asian for I.C.A.C. Unpacked. Have a good day.